This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily evening television news, broadcasting live and then available on demand on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It is Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm John Hayden from South Florida Gay News. Al has the night off. This evening, we bring you the news of and perspective representing the LGBTQ+ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ+ evening news show. Whatever happens unique in LGBTQ+ news, you're going to see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine Happening Out Television Network is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ+ community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian, trans, students, youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS healthcare, business, political advocacy, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ+ media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community.
Well, let's begin by meeting our anchors. Is there a doctor in the house? No. There's two, and we're going to get to both of them here in just a moment. There's also two Bobs on the show, so you know it's going to be an amazing Thursday evening show. Thanks for joining us, and we'll begin by meeting Dr. Number One, anchor Dr. Julio Capo, Jr. He is a proud board member of Stonewall National Museum and Archives here in Fort Lauderdale, one of the largest LGBTQ archives in the United States. And he's an associate professor of history and the deputy director of the Wilsonian Public Humanities Lab at FIU. He is also the author of the book, Welcome to Fairyland, Queer Miami Before 1940. He was an editor and contributor to Made by History section of the Washington Post, which offers historical context to today's headlines. Good evening, Julio. Will you autograph this for me after the show?
I'm very busy. Very busy.
Okay.
You know, it's so nice to look.
Shade.
Of course. It's so fun to look and to look to my left and not see Al Ferguson.
No!
I'm kidding. I'm
Shots
serious.
fired.
Kidding. I'm serious. Super serious. Sorry, not sorry. All right. Let's welcome anchor Bob Hentschel. Bob is an accountant with a local construction company, and he's the member of the planning committee for My Hollywood Pride and a member of various GLBTQ+ Disney Facebook groups, including the Gay Pride Disney Monorail Crawl. He describes himself as a nice widow man with a house in Dania Beach, a Disney Vacation Club membership, and a self-supporting cash flow. Get it? Interested singles can find him on Facebook and Twitter as Bob Hentschel. Welcome.
Thank you. And the 8th annual Gay Pride Disney Monorail Crawl starts 7 p.m. Wednesday, May 31st at the Outer Rim Lounge at Disney's Contemporary Resort in beautiful Walt Disney World.
Love that.
Now let's welcome Dr. Number Two, Dr. Bobby Huen. Bobby is a certified civil and family mediator. As the founder and principal mediator at BH Conflict Resolution Services, he helps families and businesses and individuals resolve disputes of all types. Having grown up everywhere from Hong Kong to Boston, Bobby is proud to offer a global perspective to current events. When he is not at the office or here in the It's Happening Out studio, Bobby enjoys gaming, Lego building, and hanging out on the drive. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Bob number one. And thank you, Doctor number one. And now Bob number two and Doctor number two will welcome anchor Ryan Hurst. Ryan is the Senior Major Gifts and Events Officer for the National LGBTQ Plus Task Force. He has worked in social justice for over 10 years with organizations like the Legal Defense and Education Fund and People for the American Way Foundation. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. I'm neither a doctor or a Bob, and my parents are very disappointed. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Thursday, March 23rd, 2023.
Well, we begin by queering up education. Arkansas's governor signs bill banning trans students from using the correct bathroom. Arkansas has passed a new law banning transgender students at public schools from using bathrooms that match their gender identity. Republican Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed the law, making Arkansas the fourth state to pass this type of anti-trans legislation. The law prohibits trans people from using multi-person restrooms and locker rooms in the state's public and charter schools that do not match the sex they were assigned at birth. Superintendents, principals, and teachers who violate the law face fines of at least $1,000. The law also allows parents to file private lawsuits against schools to enforce the measure. The law goes into effect this summer and requires schools to provide reasonable accommodations to trans students, including single-person restrooms. Opponents of the law say it does not provide funding for schools to provide those accommodations. In her first few months in office, the newly elected governor has already signed multiple anti-LGBTQ plus bills into law. Last month, she signed a bill reclassifying drag performances as adult-oriented entertainment. Earlier this month, she signed a bill similar to Florida's Don't Say Gay law, prohibiting classroom instruction or gender identity and sexual orientation before 5th grade. Just last week, Sanders signed a bill allowing anyone who received gender-affirming care as a minor to sue their doctor for up to 15 years after the patient turns 18 years old. And, you know, at this point, the really red states are just plowing the way for Republicans in moderate states. You remember a few years ago, North Carolina passed their trans bathroom bill, and everybody got in an uproar, rightfully, and they backtracked because, you know, the organizations saying, we won't come here for this, we won't come here for that, we won't bring our conventions, we won't bring Final Fours and things like that. But now, I think they're just counting on us not to care for it to be in a state like Arkansas that does not really host a lot of major events, world or national events, and they're just saying, we're going to do it. And because once one does it, people kind of move on to the next issue.
Well, I have a suggestion for NCAA. Please ban any schools from these states to participate in collegiate events. Yeah. Well, California already, the government of California has already said that they do not allow official travel to any of these states. Mm-hmm. So why not NCAA? NCAA and college-oriented college and professional organizations should speak out. If your state government enacts these laws, then the members inside that state is no longer allowed to participate in our activities. That will rile up a lot of college football fans, you know, college basketball fans, college sports fans in general, even professional sports. I mean, I don't think there's anything in Arkansas that qualifies as a professional sports, but, you know.
You haven't been to a Razorbacks game?
No, I
mean, they take it very, very seriously, and you know.
So I think one thing that we really need to see happen right now is that we need to see, we're in such a hyper-partisan era right now. They don't care when people who identify as Democrats or liberals, you know, get up in arms. They feed off of that. They absolutely love it. What we really need is we need allies who are conservative, who are moderate, who are Republicans, who are registered Republicans to stand in the gap for us, to call their legislators, their state legislators, their city council members, their congressional members, and say, look, I'm LGBT. I have LGBT family and friends. I have people that I care about, even if I don't know anyone who's LGBT. I'm just a decent human being who doesn't want to punch down and, you know, prevent someone from being able to pee.
I know.
You know, during the day, especially a young person. We need people to speak up, to use their voice.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that ship probably has sailed. I mean, the GOP the GOP of today is much more conservative and much more radical than the GOP of the past. Those who are call themselves fiscally conservative but socially liberal largely have left the party because they can't deal with the Trump BS and they can't deal with, and now all these people, Ron DeSantis, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, they are all disciples of Trump. They're owning the libs is their way of living. Their way of governing is just, we'll piss off the liberals. That's the only governing mandate.
The way I've heard it is that the cruelty is the point.
Exactly.
Okay. And, you know, we're going to get into another story later, but, you know, they're trying to kill us in some way, shape, or form. They don't want to do it outright, so they're hoping.
They cannot do it outright.
Well, if they have their way, they would like to. But for now, you know, they're hoping I'll call it self-select out. But, you know, it kind of saddens me. Arkansas was the state that gave us Bill Clinton. All right, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. Yeah, he did give us Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which
is progressive considering the time.
Yes, but they still used it as a witch hunt, but that's another story for another day.
Like Ryan said, I think it's a numbers game. Like that is like whether, you know, if it advantages them, right, to have enough, if enough people are in fact protesting, whether they're allies, whether they're LGBTQ plus, right, like that is, it's not a foregone conclusion that these things are going to pass. And even if they do pass, they record the amount of people who called the representatives, who called their Congress people, who called their legislators. It's really important that we voice our opinion, even from where we sit here today, like we're here in Florida. And I kind of just want to point it to a kind of different part of this story, and that is like, even though we've now seen how many states do this, is this the fourth, right? And some version of this has happened. Like there's different manifestations of these kinds of laws, variations of these laws, no doubt. We saw the example of North Carolina years ago that did in fact, you know, the protests from corporations, not unlike we saw with Disney here in Florida, for a separate bill. But it is really important for us to think about how Florida is also being used as a kind of laboratory for so many of these really anti-trans, anti-gay bills, and they're being replicated in so many different states, and not all of them are red states. So like some of them are purpley, some of them are kind of bluish, and like, you know, bluish, purpley, whatever, right? So it's what's happening. All eyes really need to be all over the country. That is, we can't just have this kind of narrow-minded idea that if it's not happening in my backyard, it's not going to happen to me. That it is really pervasive.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to say, Florida is like Arkansas. Quite honestly, Florida is like Arkansas. A deeply conservative, looking for attention governor, and a legislature that provides absolutely no check nor balance to the governor's powers. This weekend, if you're here in South Florida, as we are, Palm Beach County has their Pride in Lake Worth Beach. The event is both days, Saturday and Sunday. The parade is Sunday at 11 or noon. Down here in, in Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors, we're having the March in Heels, where we can march. We're going to try and send a message to Tallahassee that you cannot ignore us, that we must be heard. So it starts at the Pride Center at 11 o'clock on Sunday in Wilton Manors. We're going to march up to 5 Points and then back up Wilton Drive. There's going to be drag queens hosting action stations where you can register to vote, where you can re-register, which you have to do every year now, re-register for mail-in ballots, because that's part of Republican voter suppression. We can't do a lot this year except prepare for next year and try and claw back some of the power away from the people that are taking our civil rights. So that's what you can do just this weekend.
Well said.
Okay, next, let's queer up gay culture. Disney holds LGBTQ plus conference weeks after DeSantis abolishes the Reedy Creek Improvement District.
We are going to reinforce the law enforcement officers to make...
Disney is no longer going to have self-government. They're not going to have their own government. Disney is going to pay its fair share of taxes, and Disney's going to honor the debt, and that's exactly what this proposed piece of legislation will do. If you remember, when we first went down this road last spring, a lot of folks in the media were saying that, oh my gosh, Disney's actually going to pay less taxes and Floridians are going to pay more taxes. They were saying that, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Well, this puts that to bed, and so those debts will be honored and those will be paid. Now, this is obviously now going to be controlled by the state of Florida. which is no longer self-governing for them. So there's a new sheriff in town, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Disney's Reedy Creek Improvement District was established in 1968 and granted Disney World the power to tax itself to pay for water, power, roads, and fire services on the 25,000-acre property near Orlando. DeSantis signed the bill abolishing the district in February and declared that, quote, "the corporate kingdom finally comes to an end," end quote. DeSantis said, quote, "there's a new sheriff in town and accountability will be the order of the day," end quote. But in what certainly seems like an intentional rebuke of anti-LGBTQ plus Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the Walt Disney Company is going to host a massive LGBTQ plus rights conference in Central Florida this September. The Out and Equal Workplace Summit touts itself as the largest LGBTQ plus conference in the world, uniting over 5,000 professionals from major companies and the U.S. government seeking to create inclusive workplaces. The Miami Herald reported that the conference will take place this year at the Walt Disney World Resort from September 11 to 14, and also that Disney will host again in 2024 when DeSantis could be running for president. Okay, first off, full disclosure, I am a Disney stockholder. And my first thought was, well, T, then he, and furthermore, Neener. But, you know, I did a little research. Many of you know that Florida Gay Days is coming up in June. I only plug it every time I show up here. Florida Gay Days and One Mighty Weekend, media sponsored by Happening Out and Hotspots Magazine, ding. June 1 to 4 for Florida Gay Days. Disneyland Paris has their Pride celebration on June 17th, and the California Gay Days at Disneyland Anaheim is September 22nd to the 24th. This may or may not be a money decision. You know, when I hear 5,000 people are coming to a conference at Disney, you know, the little piece of stock in the back of my head just goes cha-ching, 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 because that's 5,000 people staying at hotels, eating in the restaurants, possibly going to the theme parks after the conference, you know, tooling out at Disney Springs. They bring their families, they come a few days before, they stay a few days after, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Yeah. So now, you could make a case for 2024 being a thumb up to the nose because I'm involved in you know, organizing conventions. These things are always signed at least a year in advance. You could make a case for that, but personally, I'm glad they didn't cancel 2023.
Yeah. Well, and as a fellow Disney fan who has an annual pass, I also really enjoy Disney, and also I really appreciate the fact that Disney is actually proactively doing something, although, to be honest, if they really do want to do something, and this is a message for Mr. Iger himself, make Gay Days official. The Gay Days and One Mighty Weekend has never been a quote-unquote official event. It started out as an employee protest of Disney LGBTQ plus employees who would feel like they're being neglected by the corporation. So they dress in red and show up at the parks and make themselves be visible. Ever since then, the One Magic Weekend or One Mighty Weekend, as anyone would call it, is part of quote-unquote unofficial. Only a couple of years ago did Disney even acknowledge the fact that by pushing out Pride merchandise. Now, Mr. Iger, here's your chance. You want to stick it around DeSantis? Make Gay Days official. Make it a whole week. Make it a Pride week at Disney.
Yeah, right.
Having been to Gay Days Anaheim a few times, I will tell you that the resort out there is much more involved in Gay Days. They host the Welcome Center. Their employees host the welcoming cocktail party on Friday night. Now, I don't know if that's official or not. That's just observations.
Yeah.
I think you're right. This could be a money decision, but I think it's also an important task of advocacy and allyship that a lot of businesses can take a part in. I mean, a lot of businesses and corporations led the way on DEI work and pushed state governments to be more inclusive, and that's frankly what we need them to do again. Businesses don't care about culture wars. Businesses care about profits, and that also means attracting the best talent. And the best talent sometimes is LGBTQ. We have families. We want to have a workplace that respects us and recognizes us and sees us. It's better for the bottom line for you to build an inclusive workspace.
For sure. And I really appreciate this narrative. Like that to kind of see, like in the last year or two, right? That is when Disney finally did speak up against Don't Say Gay. We're seeing this kind of happening before our very eyes, like the embrace of the open embrace, right? Because it's always kind of done it in a wink kind of way, right? But to kind of see this kind of corporate embracement of LGBT, especially right when so much of the attacks on the gay community is around ideas that somehow they're trying to recruit children, corrupt children, and right, like it's Disney's brand to be about the experience of children. So really kind of turning that on its head. I too kind of just want Disney to fully embrace this position, because I actually think that might be one of the most powerful modes of resistance against DeSantis. That is, I think that Disney really can be that key player that does change the outcome for what things will look like in the coming year or two.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Next, let's queer up entertainment. Pop epic Mother Mary, slay of the century, to feature Anne Hathaway and Michaela Coel as lovers. Anne Hathaway and Michaela Coel are teaming up to play girlfriends in Mother Mary, an upcoming A24 film about a pop star's relationship with her fashion designer. In other words, an LGBTQ plus pop romance that will almost definitely have dark undertones. Anne Hathaway will be playing a pop artist, while Michaela Coel will be the fashion designer. But that's not all, because Mother Mary's soundtrack will be created entirely by queer fan favorite Charlie XCX, while Jack Antonoff, best known for producing music by Lana Del Rey, Lorde, and Taylor Swift, will assist with soundtrack duties. That's going to be great. The film's title either alludes to Jesus' mother or the gay Twitter meme about women being a bit slay. Knowing what we know already, we're assuming it's the latter. According to Deadline, Mother Mary will be created by A24, the film production company behind the Oscar-sweeping Everything Everywhere All at Once and hit HBO show Euphoria. David Lowery, known for A Ghost Story and The Green Knight, has written the script and will sit in the director's chair. Predictably, LGBTQ plus Twitter has gone into meltdown as a number of queer interests collide all at once. One fan wrote, quote, Mother Mary, more like mothers too many. Another wrote, quote, pop stars, fashion designer, lesbians, A24. Yeah, they made it for me. I love this story. The story makes me happy. Because I mean, we're another story, you know, where I know we're going to talk about representation in media shortly. But it's so nice to see these kind of spaces and it's A24, which has done so much great work in the past and kind of making sure that LGBTQ voices and faces are seen and heard and their stories are told. And they've done so at great acclaim, right? Like whether it's Moonlight or I just saw last weekend, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Such a queer film, and such a beautiful film.
We need to mention that A24 also put out The Whale, which won Brendan Fraser Best Actor, which is also a gay-themed movie.
Sure.
We need to mention that.
Well, A24 has taken over from Miramax as the art house studio of choice without the icky, rapist thing. But I actually am very glad that LGBTQ themed movies are back in the front burner in the entertainment and award show, especially right now when our representation is coming directly under threat by various national, state, and international actors. I will follow that up later in the next piece.
Well, it's so important that they're telling these kinds of human stories and not, just following the model of, major blockbuster, superhero, Star Wars, which all I love, by the way. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars. Please never stop putting out Star Wars movies. But these human stories are really important to tell right now. We need to get away from the escapism and start seeing media that is about real life. It helps us to build compassion for people. It helps us to understand where people we might not know in real life are coming from. So kudos to A24.
I have a quick follow-up question. Does that include even Solo?
Yes, it includes. Solo was actually really good. I'm so sorry it was a victim of bad marketing, but that was such a good Star Wars movie.
You are incorrect. And one last thing before we move on. A24 does do great work, and they put on fantastic junkets, so call me. I'd love to get back on that circuit. My favorite Anne Hathaway story, I was interviewing her for the first Alice in Wonderland movie, and it was, she played the White Queen, Helena Bonham Carter played the Red Queen. So I go in there, I sit down, the two of them are there together, sit down, look, and I go, oh, look at us. 3 queens on a Sunday morning. It was one of the best moments of my life, and I love it. Mwah. Annie, I love you so much.
Sweet.
Well,
that's all I got.
Okay. Well, then next, let's queer up LGBTQ plus civil rights. Uganda passes bill punishing LGBTQ plus people with death. Uganda's parliament has passed a bill imposing the death penalty for homosexuality. Homosexual sex was already punishable by life imprisonment under Ugandan law. The new bill, a revived version of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation that was nullified by the East African nation's Constitutional Court in 2014, will make aggravated homosexuality a capital crime and imposes a life sentence for, quote, recruitment, promotion, and funding of same-sex activities, end quote. According to Human Rights Watch, the proposed law is the first to make identifying as LGBTQ plus a crime. The bill passed with overwhelming support. Only 2 of the Christian majority nation's 389 MPs voted against it. One of the 2 MPs who opposed the legislation said, quote, the bill is ill-conceived, it contains provisions that are unconstitutional, reverses the gains registered in the fight against gender-based violence, and criminalize individuals instead of conduct that contravenes all known legal norms. The bill now goes to the president, who has not said whether he supports the legislation. However, he has signed previous anti-LGBTQ plus bills into law. Uganda is one of the 30 African countries in which homosexuality is criminalized. According to The Guardian, more than 110 LGBTQ plus Ugandans, including a disproportionate number of transgender individuals, reported incidents including arrest, sexual violence, evictions, and public undressing to the advocacy group Sexual Minorities Uganda in February. 2 things. One, which is not, I didn't read into the story, is that the U.S. government has already threatened withdrawal of all foreign aid from Uganda in response to this law, which is what every Western nation should do. Uganda largely depends on foreign aid. Without foreign aid, that country GDP might as well be cut in half. So right now, Western nations need to do their thing. Of course, I'm also extremely relieved that this is coming up during a Biden presidency. Let's face it, the last president and his supporters would have cheered on this law. They wouldn't have opposed it.
Well, the press secretary just signed into law.
Yeah, I mean, after all, if Huckabee Sanders can enact that law right here in Arkansas, she would.
Yeah.
Oh,
but remember,
for sure.
The most remarkable thing about this law is that just literally identifying as LGBTQ is now a crime. It is not that I need to have sex with someone of the same gender. It's just the acknowledgement or even announcement to anyone that I'm gay, that someone can go to the police and report it, and I can be arrested. This is absurd. Mm-hmm. This is criminalizing someone for basically who they are, not even what they've done. And that's, like the MP said, has no legal basis in known civilization.
Right? So this is another place we need to look at, is over in Africa. You mentioned earlier Florida, looking at Florida as the test, the test tube, so to speak. I don't remember where I heard this. I know it was from a reputable source, but there are legislative think pots in America that ship this crap over to Africa and get it passed. If they want to do it here. They want to do it here badly.
Oh, exporting hate is real. And yes, associations such as quote-unquote Alliance Defending Freedom and Heritage Foundation, all those organizations have been shipping model legislation that anti-LGBTQ to the states and exporting it internationally. They recruit the most homophobic preachers, rile up people in a country where people are ignorant about sexual orientation and gender identity, and cast us into, I mean, it's the same thing they're doing right here, calling us groomers, casting aspersion that all LGBTQ plus people are child molesters. It's the blood libel that Anita Bryant has invented. And that never gone away.
I mean, whatever it is, aggravated homosexuality is or isn't, is really hard to, I mean, to define something like that is actually almost impossible. But that is, I am grateful for this part of the conversation too, that is to imagine, the funding, if we're to think about not just in terms of foreign aid, but the funding that's done by these really fundamentalist groups in the United States and elsewhere, who are often, I mean, I don't want to kind of minimize homegrown movements either. That is that there is a great deal of support in places like Uganda for these kinds of this bill, for example. But so much of that has been exported from the United States, from other places, and it's a form of neocolonialism. I mean, right? That is, we can't separate those two ever.
I just want to add that ironically, this guy's from Massachusetts, Scott Lively, who was a very vocal fundamentalist preacher who claimed that Nazis are gay. He literally wrote a book called The Pink Swastika, claiming that Nazis are literally gay people, in order to basically associate us with Nazis. And he is one of the first person who actually exports this kind of rhetoric alongside with his fellow Christian fundamentalists and Christian nationalists over to Africa.
Yeah, well said.
Interesting how he picked a pink swastika while ignoring the pink triangle.
Right.
I will say I'm an aggravated homosexual. So if you want to know what one looks like, right here.
Now we know.
I'm an aggravated homosexual. No, seriously, you made a really good point that the United States and other Western countries can use the power of the purse to influence public policy in other countries. This is one area where we really need to step up and do that. But think about how much it undermines us in those countries for proponents of this law to be able to point to Florida, to Arkansas, to other conservative states that are trying to oppress LGBTQ people. Yeah, it totally undermines our position. I'm also very thankful that President Biden is president right now and can use the power of the purse, but we really need to hold ourselves accountable so that when we stand up on our soapbox, we can speak with authority.
One thing to keep in mind when we say let's cut off U.S. aid, yes, it's a mighty purse, but it also opens the door for China and Russia to come in and basically buy up. They've been buying, ever since the end of the Cold War, they've been buying up, poor third world countries for their oil, building their bridges, their infrastructure. And if we pull out all together, we really just leave them open.
May I interject, though? As an expert on international relations, I would say that China, much less likely Russia, is the culprit here. China is buying up Africa. China is buying a large swath of Africa. They're building roads in those countries, basically in exchange for mineral rights. And often, such as Sri Lanka, where they built a port, but slap a contract so onerous on the Sri Lanka government, they literally run the government out of money. This is exploitative. This is economic colonialism. And in a way that's, the African nations should beware that, they might not want to play by our rules as Western countries by, not writing laws that condemn gay people to death, but you want to write with China, you're signing a contract with the devil.
Yeah. Well, I'm not here encouraging them to go to China. No, but that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. But we will continue to follow this and other developments in the Africa.
Next, let's queer up entertainment. GLAAD report: LGBTQ+ representation down, racial diversity up on TV. According to the latest edition of GLAAD's annual Where We Are on TV report, released Tuesday, the racial diversity of LGBTQ+ characters on television is up, but LGBTQ+ representation overall is down slightly. This marks the 27th year of GLAAD tracking the presence of LGBTQ+ characters on television, and the 18th edition of the Where We Are on TV report. This year's report covers shows that are already premiered or are expected to return between June 1st, 2022 and May 31st, 2023. There were 141 LGBTQ+ characters on broadcast, 139 on cable, and 356 on streaming services Apple TV+, Amazon, Prime, Disney+, HBO Max, Hulu, Netflix, Peacock, and Paramount+. This year, GLAAD counted 596 regular regular and recurring LGBTQ plus characters on broadcast, cable, and streaming, a decrease of 6.4% from the previous year's 637 LGBTQ plus characters. For the past 4 years, over 50% of LGBTQ plus characters on broadcast have been people of color, but this year that is down slightly to 48%. For the first time in this report's history, streaming features a majority of LGBTQ plus people of color. In total, 51%, or 304 of the 596 LGBTQ plus characters are people of color. I think this is fantastic, and it goes back to what I was speaking about earlier, that it's really important that these streaming services, broadcast, cable television shows are showing human stories. It's all about being represented, and I'm really glad that entertainment companies are not backing down in the face of, this renewed opposition to LGBTQ people coming from governments in conservative areas. Particularly, RuPaul's Drag Race is now on MTV. It started on Logo TV. I remember, the only reason to subscribe to Logo TV was because I really wanted to see the new season of RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm glad that Viacom, which owns CBS and I think Paramount Plus, I'm so sorry, Viacom, if I'm wrong, has promoted that to MTV, and it's now covered on their streaming platforms as well.
Is MTV really a promotion these days?
A much larger audience.
I was wondering that too. Are young people watching MTV? I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, it's still vertical promotion. I mean, look, MTV is no longer as influential as today when we were teenagers.
How dare you?
Oh. We both have PhDs. Don't make me.
Video killed the radio star, Bobby. Video killed the radio star.
I do have the face for radio, but that's not the point. But one of the things I want to point out is that while the numbers of her are encouraging, I want to point out that presence on the TV show, the fact that there's a character of LGBTQ person of color on the TV show, doesn't mean that it has substance that concerns the LGBTQ person of color. I mean, one of the Russo brothers show up as a gay character in Avengers Endgame. That he had 30 seconds of screen time. That doesn't count.
I was going to suggest something similar. That is there's a lot of encouraging news here, and I certainly don't want to diminish that, right? But that is, and that's been the case for a long time, where if you saw people of color on a show or on film, or if you saw a queer person, LGBTQ person, they were often the same person. They would kind of minoritize one character and give them 10 different identities. That way that they can, a form of tokenism, right, in these media platforms. And there have been shows that have since gone off air, like Pose is a really good example, that did such a great job centering the experiences of LGBTQ people of color, that we need to see more of. Orange is the New Black was, I felt like, one of the kind of path breaking, in that space too. So I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and I also kind of I feel like I'm always just this negative person, everything's awful, but but the other thing too, right, is to make sure that people behind the cameras are also right, the people who are writing the stories, the people who are producing the stories. It's really important that we take to account that too, because I mean, so that there can be human stories, as you noted, Ryan, that are really relatable and feel real, right? That they're actually based on our experience.
Writers write about their lived experience, right? So I mean, in a way, LGBTQ writers and directors are even more important than having. I mean, I know a lot of people complain that, why is a cisgender woman playing a transgender woman, or sometimes why is a straight man playing a gay man? I'm not particularly bothered by that. Acting is acting. You're supposed to act. If we only cast gay men to gay men to play gay male characters, we are going to see Neil Patrick Harris 24 hours.
Well, there's more than that.
And that's a bad thing. Why?
There are other gay people. I just want to make clear.
I mean, you know what I mean, though. There's only so many known gay actors out.
Is that the single gay actor that you were talking about before?
It was.
That is partially blind, partially deaf.
It's him.
Yeah, Bob, I want to bring you into the conversation.
First off, when I read this, it was like, wow, the numbers are that big, because I'm old enough to remember where the only gay character, and I was not allowed to watch this in the days of my remote youth, was Jody on Soap, played by Billy Crystal. God bless him forever and always, because it could have ruined his career, and it didn't. You know, and I understand, you know, there's a little bit of concern about, oh, it's less than last year, and that's good to know. But ultimately, what is the trend over the last 27 years? You know, the fact that there were triple digits was news to me, because I don't watch, my gay television watching is watching the Nate and Jeremiah Project, who, and I'll die mad at Nate Berkus for not marrying me, but that's another story for another
There's still
day.
time. There's still time.
No, they are happily married, and it was obvious, despite the arguments on the TV. But you know, it's the trend. You know, this is the accountant in me. You know, I deal with reporting like this all the time. Oh, our sales are down, the sales are up, and it's like, well, you know what? Why is this happening? You know, that is important. You know, at least, you know, the good news is there's still representation. Thank God it's predominantly people of color, because, you know, let's face it, Black lesbian women are probably more invisible than anybody anywhere all the time. You know, so what I want to see, you know, let's keep trending upward. Yes, we have a hiccup, but let's keep trending upward.
Yeah, and you know, this is, I remember Jody on Soap, but I was only like 5 when that thing was on, so I didn't really see it till I was older and it was in syndication. But I do remember Matt on Melrose Place, and oh my God, that was just, it was like such a thing. And even though he got like 30 seconds of screen time per episode, he needed better storylines. But at least it was something, and that was like back in the early to mid 90s. And but this is how we start to get around Don't Say Gay.
Yeah.
Because all the shows that are out there, I mean, streaming is done predominantly by much younger people. You know, they're abandoning cable, and that's where a lot of the great characters are. You know, it used to be only broadcast, then all the good characters started being on cable, and now they're on streaming. So this is how we get in. This is how we say, this is who we are. Look at us. You know, we have our issues. We have our relationships. Some are fabulous. Some fall apart spectacularly on television and in real life. But that's the thing. We're exactly the same. And this is, at least for now, how we're going to continue to show it. And I want to make one point, Bob, to you, just a small pushback. Yes, you're right. You have to look at like an aggregate over the 27 years, perhaps just over the last 5 years. But it's also interesting to watch as all these hateful bills rise and all the hateful rhetoric comes out, to see how that corresponds. And that's something we won't know for a couple of years.
Point.
But to see how it corresponds. So this dip in itself isn't alarming, but when you look at the context of everything around it, it's like, this is a trend that I believe that we do need to watch.
A valid point.
Well said. All right, next, we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m.
Matthew Darren, former American Idol contestant and singer-songwriter, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ plus evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support, though. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots magazine, happening on our television network and Queer News Tonight.
I'm Dr. John Hayden, and on behalf of the LGBTQ+ reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Dr. Julio Capo Jr., Dr. Bob Hentschel, Dr. Bobby Huen, and Dr. Ryan Hurst, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. But before we end our broadcast, we have one final story and queer up the big interview. The legendary Norm Kent discusses his legacy in South Florida. Queer News Tonight anchor Al Ferguson recently sat down with the iconic editor of South Florida Gay News, Norm Kent. Also my employer, also a mentor, also someone I'm proud to call a friend. They discussed his health issues, his years in South Florida, and what the future holds.
Well, we have a very exciting interview at Queer News Tonight. One of the legends, not only here in South Florida, but for LGBTQ community. When I travel around the country, one of the legacy names of telling news in America over especially the last 10 years has been South Florida Gay News. And the voice that was the inspiration of South Florida Gay News is Norm Kent. And whether you love Norm Kent or whether you hate Norm Kent, you have a very specific opinion on Norm Kent. And this is the first time I've talked to him multiple times before, but first time I've had the opportunity to sit down with him and talk about legacy and LGBTQ community. Norm Kent, welcome to Queer News Tonight.
Thanks a lot for
Norm. Let's get the elephant in the room right off the start. This long legacy. We'll talk about your history in a minute, but let's talk about the medical issue. You had a brain tumor, and you went through some life-threatening medical procedures, surgeries. You're 73 years old. Tell us about where you're at right now in your health.
I wish it was just the brain tumor from June of 2021, but when they were doing some CAT scans, they found out I had pancreatic cancer. And luckily, because they were doing so many prophylactic measures for the brain scan, they found the pancreatic cancer at stage 1, and they removed it immediately. And then all I had to worry about was the swelling on the brain, and they couldn't reduce the swelling on the brain, so they had to go in life or death surgery. They took out the tumor, and I chose life, and here I am.
Yeah, here you are. I read you got COVID.
In the hospital at Jackson Memorial.
Oh my goodness.
While I was supposed to be protected from it.
Yeah.
And that was really hurtful because some of my closest friends who were in their 60s and 70s, talented lawyers and professionals in South Florida, were passing away from COVID, including Al Benetton. And, you know, you come down to Fort Lauderdale like I did at the Sonesta Beach Hotel, sailing in a bathing suit, looking at the ocean in Key West and dream about what the future will be. And you never dreamt that one day they would be putting trucks behind Broward General Hospital and stacking bodies in like a third world country had just been bombed. But that happened here in Fort Lauderdale. And one of our most talented writers, Rod Hagwood from the Sun Sentinel, is a wonderful gay man, a terrific cook, and has a great husband, and a tremendous journalist. You know, he was in covers entertainment, and was a frequent guest on my radio show. He was writing about putting bodies in storage next to Broward General. This was not normal for the gay. It wasn't normal for America, let alone the gay community.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I can hear and immediately I think I understand you, because I can hear the anger in your voice of summarizing the last couple of years. It's interesting. Queer News Tonight launched in January of 2020, and one of the first stories we did in reporting at Queer News Tonight was this strange virus that had been detected in Wuhan. In the first week in January, we reported that in 2020. So you look at the last couple of years. You go through the brain tumor, you have the pancreatic cancer, you get COVID, we go through isolation and pandemic. You've come out of most of that. You're still fighting and coming out of that. How did you keep your spirits up? All the stuff that you've done in your life, how did you get through the last couple of years?
Because first, I never look at the world as down. What you just said is you sensed anger. I'd like to think I'm more like Robert Frost, that I have a lover's quarrel with the world. The opportunity to be alive, to be like Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and I will move the world, is a unique chance that you get as a free American citizen that throughout the world you see people don't get. You remember being 18 years old and protesting in Chicago and watching the mayor of Chicago during the Democratic National Convention say about 18-year-old protesters against the war in Vietnam, say don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. And in 1970, and one of my friends from Plainview, Long Island, who I had met in a Little League game, was shot and killed by the National Guard at Kent State University. People have always had to stand naked in front of the cannon and challenge the forces that be. Government was created to control people, while the people are supposed to believe government doesn't try to control them, but freedom is free. That's what the First Amendment says.
Have you always, as it relates to government, not been trusting? Have you always pushed back against the power of whatever the power is? Has that been that's who you've been your whole life?
Yeah, think about it. It says Congress shall make no law. In most of the first of the 10 amendments, it talks about the powers government does not have, which on the flip side is saying what rights, powers, and privileges citizens have. And there are always these forces that want to strip them of power. And one of the things that they used to do and get away with was bully the gay community for daring to be different. We're a society that preaches individuality and demands conformity. The logic of what we've done is reversible and needs to be. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of standing your ground and
so that observation that you've made, that's been you your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. You went to Hofstra, just to make sure that we catch up viewers, because a lot of people will not know your story. They will know Norm Kent. They will know Creation and what South Florida Gay News is all about, but they don't really know you. You've been here, and you came to South Florida 47 years ago. You've been here 47 years.
I used to call Hofstra the Hartford of Hempstead. Yes, and the very first thing I did here, when I moved to a place called The Beginnings in Coral Springs, 2930 Forest Hills Boulevard, was start a sports newspaper for high school students.
Yeah.
And
were you grooming back then by chance? No, I'm only joking.
I don't. The newspaper this week, they're doing something about Ron DeSantis grooming, and they have to explain that to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't understand a lot of what's happened in the last 2 years. Other than that, in the year 2020, I know the Dodgers finally won the World Series, and that made me very excited.
So 47 years ago, you come to South Florida. I have seen the pictures of Wilton Manors in that time frame. I saw pictures of the Marlin Hotel out on the beach and what was going on in the gay community. When you came here, you're in Coral Springs, what was Wilton, just describe in that time period in the 70s when you came to South Florida. What was it like for you?
It was, we didn't have a political community. It was a small right-wing trailer park with, I think, about 13,000 people. And in the year 1999,
I apologize for interrupting you, but for our audience that might not know, Norm Kent just said, basically, Wilton Manors was a trailer park, or big portions of South Florida were trailer parks.
It was.
I'm just making sure that everybody understands what you just said.
In fact, the area where the Metropolitan is used to be a rundown, beat-up trailer park where homeless people lived a long time ago. And now, look, it's $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. I was not always a part of it, but late in the 20th, in 1999 or so, I saw that Wilton Manors was developing, like many communities were, into, I don't want to use the word gay mecca, but many gay LGBTQ professionals were moving in, and they started business and professional groups, and were changing the face and complexion of the city. Back in 2001, the Miami Herald did an article in the paper about how Wilton Manors was becoming a same-sex centric community, and I just sensed that it would grow. And I had a paper called the Express Gay News back then, and I was very proud of it. We published over 250 issues over 4 years. And I was bought out by one of these gay conglomerates that got government money, and they gave me a lot of money to stop publishing. If I look back with any regrets, I regret the 3 years I had a non-compete between the sale of the Express and my ability to start South Florida Gay News again, because the community had grown. And if anything, the papers we should have had should have illuminated and showcased so many people in our community that had done so well and so much and contributed to the beginning of things like our fund and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and Broward House and Center One and others. And one of them was kind and generous enough to come up to me as a lawyer and say, would you like a chance to run the largest AIDS project in South Florida? And the thought of being able to help people that were friends of mine who died in the 1980s in California and New York and become director of AIDS Project Florida, we called it APFL, was a great opportunity. And really, between my law practice and the Express Gay News and AIDS Project Florida and playing baseball every year in the Dodger adult baseball camp, something had to go. And you know it wasn't going to be my baseball.
That's funny. You know, it's interesting to me because I completely, what you just said in terms of wanting to illuminate the story that you wanted to tell, I completely understand that, because through Express, and as you've just said, you were an attorney, and a lot of defense work, notable in terms of many of the people that you represented and defended. You took on many, many interesting cases. But Express comes along, and then the 3 years of time, and you form South Florida Gay News. Over the time that you've had South Florida Gay News, you have literally told the story of LGBT America and LGBT South Florida. There's virtually nothing that you have not touched.
Well, if you can bear to accept a compliment for a moment, one of the things that I've got to see and watch is this very show that you produce. And you've done a remarkable job with the staff and talent that you have of doing the same thing. The important thing to remember, especially as a journalist, is that sometimes you have to take the good with the bad. You want to be able to write wonderful things about great people who've achieved enormous success, but if you find out that you've taken $100,000 worth of ads from a gay lawyer who did estates for elderly gay men that you personally referred to him, and discover through your law practice or the Florida bar that in fact and in truth he stole well over $1 million from the gay community, you have to write about it. So as a journalist, you're unfortunately required to say that. So we've had a president of Pride go to jail for stealing $48,000. And it's unfortunate, but your duty is to tell the truth. As a journalist, to be transparent. And I couldn't do it alone. I'm the publisher. I relied on Jason Parsley and his experience at FAU, and a wealth of people like John Hayden, who's worked for Deco Tribe as a reporter. And some of my writers, Penn Bullock, went on to the New York Times, and Ian Drew went on to People magazine. And I can't even remember some of their names. They've written books. So you're proud at what they have done and what they have achieved on their own. And that's the goal in life, to be all that you can be.
I'm curious, Norm, at this point in your, and thank you for the compliment on queerness tonight, it's very much appreciated. With all of the things that you have done with South Florida Gay News and where it's been in documenting our story for all of these years, do you feel like you've gotten the due for the commitment to that? You haven't made a fortune on South Florida Gay News, and I'm saying that as nicely as I can possibly say it. We all know that. But have you gotten the due that you think you should get at this point in your life, with everything that you've gone through, the transition of South Florida, SFGM, which I'll talk about in a minute? Has it been good for you? Have you gotten?
I've enjoyed every moment of it. I never looked at publishing and writing as work. I've always felt that the good you do comes back to you. I've met remarkable people, wonderfully talented human beings who have had themselves great lives, tough battles here and there. The producer of my last radio show, I thought he was a great young producer, and found out that he overdosed on fentanyl. I don't like those kinds of things happening. They're hurtful. But when you say, have I gotten my due, I don't know what I was supposed to get or expect to get. I studied and read Greek writers and philosophy. And one of the great quotes of Pericles is that, if Athens shall appear great to you, consider simply that her glories were won by good men and women doing their duty daily over time. You learn, like Aristotle said, that excellence is not a single action. Excellence is a habit that you produce, and you insist upon it. Mediocrity has no place in my life. You get one chance to hit a home run, so you try. Look, Mickey Mantle used to say singles are important too. You got to keep the line moving, so that's important. You can't just win, as Aaron Judge found out, by hitting 62 homers. They still didn't win the World Series. My friend Dusty Baker did.
Yeah, you know, Norm, I want to give a couple of examples of this kind of poke in the eye philosophy that you did. In full disclosure to viewers, you're one of only a handful of people through my entire life where I saw something and I literally spit my coffee out. And one morning after, I want to show the Dean Trentellis cover of SFGN. I saw the cover about the Coral Ridge story, and you lived. I knew outside of this community what was going on at Coral Ridge and what he was doing on his Sunday television broadcast at Coral Ridge on US 1. And they had their 50th anniversary, and they reached out to say, recognize us in Fort Lauderdale, and the city commission and our mayor made the decision to have this commemoration of the 50th anniversary. And Norm Kent's response as representation for South Florida Gay News is to do a cover of the mayor of Fort Lauderdale in a priest outfit with a cross on his chest saying his message back to you, get over it. And when I saw the cover of SFGN, I was taking a sip of coffee and choked and spit my coffee out because it was like, oh my gosh, you were just fearless.
I will tell you this because it's troublesome. Dean was my friend for 35 years. He hasn't talked to me since that cover. He says I was ruining his political chances. No, when you become a politician, you hold yourself out to the public and you have to take the risk that you're going to be criticized. And I think Dean, in many respects, has done a remarkable job and been visionary and represented the gay community and helped out so many clients. We have reason to love him, to like him. And I also think, and I'm not afraid to say this, he's terribly thin-skinned and he can't handle criticism well. And that's why he doesn't talk to me. He didn't like the fact, and this is more upsetting than just siding with the church on a singular issue, what the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has done for this community in supporting nonprofits and helping people tragically with drugs and HIV is unprecedented, and they should be honored. And when they came up with the idea of developing a place for not homeless people, but for low-cost, low-income people to stay in a housing project near my law office on Andrews Avenue. Everybody backed it, including, I can't even remember all the organizations, from Kathleen Cannon on. Everybody backed it, and Dean Trentalis opposed it by siding with the residents of Coral Ridge, saying it would hurt our community, but it's okay to build 40-story high-rises at Sunrise and Sears. No, I don't think that's fair to the gay community. I don't think it was fair. I don't think it is fair. And somebody needed to say that, and I wrote an editorial opposing it. And unbeknownst to me, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation liked the editorial so much, they published it in every single edition of the Sun Sentinel on a Sunday. And Dean still won't talk to me because of it. In fact, I confirmed with Scott Wyman that he's got like 12, his assistant, that he's gotten like 12 texts from me individually on his cell phone and never responded to me. Even after COVID, I sent one. But I'll tell you the truth, he's still a great guy and a wonderful mayor. The essence of America is we should be free to disagree.
There's where I was going to go with your observation. Is it in our LGBTQ community, can we disagree and still be valuable in the different seats that we represent, whether we agree with it or not? The greatness of our community is that we all represent in different ways.
You just said it. That's the essence of America. It's not only dissonance and activism, it's diversity. We can't swim like the fish. We can't fly like an eagle. We can't run like a gazelle, but we each bring to the table a different measure of our quality as a human being. A lot of people don't realize that Misty Eyes is not just a case manager, is not just a drag queen, but a case manager at Latino Salute or Sunser, that a lecturer who hopes to be one of the plaintiffs in my lawsuit against the governor for what he's doing to the transgender community. A lecturer, AKA Lyman Buff, has a cosmetology degree from a New York university and designs clothing at the Wick Theater. That we were blessed. Ronnie Larson and his amazingly humorous shows on Dixie Highway. He was once the president of his high school class in Bakersfield, California. We have so much that we bring to our lives. In fact, I'll say this about the gay community, because we used to be called queers and fags and all sorts of names. And I think about it now and then. I thought about it the other day. It's really ridiculous to put us down, because if anybody has stood up to adversity and challenges and pressure, it is the gay community. Our mettle has been tested. Our will has been challenged. Our capacities have been called into question, and we have survived and thrived. And now we have something like the Wilton Manors Business Association or the Red Party Gala, which raised $100,000 for the World AIDS Museum. These are remarkable achievements for a community that in the year 1987, Ronald Reagan, who used to talk about freedom, wouldn't even mention by name. They didn't dare use the word AIDS in public.
Yeah.
You let me talk, that's a bad thing. In 1982, there was a librarian named Todd Shuttlesworth at the Broward County Library, and he had HIV, and the library fired him because they didn't want him handing books to children. They fired him, and I was so proud that in the year 2012, one of the partners who helped me out in starting South Florida Gay News, Pierre Guidugli, held a reception in that very library, in the very room where Todd Shuttleworth couldn't hand out books for gay marriage. So the world comes around. If a man stands his position and there abides, eventually the world will come around to him.
Interesting, you bring it back in full circle to SFGN. I give that example. You are in transition at SFGN in terms of turnover and responsibility. You mentioned Jason Parsley already. You mentioned John Hayden. South Florida Gay News had an interesting couple of months, and I just bring your attention to it. We've just had Pride of Americas and the Pride event, and South Florida Gay News, John Hayden specifically, and Jason Parsley, was really front and center of going, what's going on, and investigating and talking to people, and why aren't you talking to us? And what was interesting to me about that is there was so much criticism of SFGN, which is, why are you telling this story? You're hurting our community. And I kept thinking, wait, they should be telling this story. It helps our community. What was your reaction to all of the stuff that you watched?
Just what you said. It's important to be transparent and tell the truth. The Pride of the Americas had some difficulties, and faced with those difficulties, they might have proved for us that less is more. We didn't have to become the biggest and the best, as E.F. Schumacher wrote years ago. Becoming bigger isn't automatically becoming better. And let's face it, nobody wants to tell the truth that one of the reasons Pride of the Americas had difficulties, and many of the minority organizations, is they got loans from the Broward County Tourism Board in 2020 to orchestrate festivals, which was generous of Broward County to help us out. Many of the charities, they have hundreds of millions of dollars, and we couldn't pay it back because of what happened with COVID. The festivals weren't run. Boy George was initially contracted, and I was volunteering as the attorney back then for the Pride of the Americas. He was initially contracted for $150,000 non-refundable in 2020, and we didn't hold the event, and he could have asked for that entire amount of money back. Instead, 3 years later, he honored the commitment, and from what I have read on Facebook, he brought his whole group called the Culture Club, and he was generous to a fault and nice to everybody, and they loved meeting him. Every not-for-profit winds up being a small core of people who go through difficulties because not only are they volunteering events, they have their own lives, they have their own lovers and losses. And all I can say is that the event might have been moved from the beaches of Fort Lauderdale, where somebody was stabbed a few years ago, to, some AstroTurf on the park. But with the help of good people, it apparently came off. We told the true story about the difficulties the membership was having, and hopefully some college or high school student looked at that and will say, someday I'm going to be part of that group, and I'm going to make it better because I want to improve life for people here. And hopefully that's what you did when you sat and said, I want to do a TV show that talks about Joe Pallant and his insurance company, that talks about all the great people that started nowhere and wound up somewhere. And like I said, the gay community has been tested, and that I've been tested my whole life. I'll never forget when I hit a baseball that won a softball game against the Fort Lauderdale police in the league that Jimmy Stork and Dave Liddy and George Kessinger and I had started. And it was a big hit. I slid into third. They called me safe. The winning run crossed home plate. And the police were so angry because we beat the police team. And I said, pretty good for a faggot, huh?
Norm, the transition then that we're watching at SFGN with leadership like Jason starting to fill the role that you historically have filled, John Hayden in his reporting as community editor. Are you proud at what you're seeing your creation do for community?
Yes, but I'm not ready to turn off the faucet and stop pouring water. And when I heard about what the governor is doing with the transgender community and all the people I have represented in the transgender community for so many years that have such an incredible wealth of experience and talent, like Miss Allison over at the Boardwalk, was just considered some bookkeeper. She's got a degree in finance too. They're not going to be treated as second-class citizens. I will tell you some very important people in my life who I recently met, because my partner, now ex-partner of many years, John Fugate, just married Brian Swinford in Las Vegas. We got to go there, and it was cold there too. Wherever he takes me, snowshoe, West Virginia. It's cold, but I got to go to Savannah, Georgia, and the first Jewish temple in 1733 in America. But let me not get too distracted, because I was going to tell you this story about the governor, and I want everybody to understand this. And please feel free to use Heather and Nikki Grimes as an example, because John and Brian are together, and for Christmas, Brian took me to see his sister and her wife, and we got to celebrate in their house in Jacksonville, where in December, little Jaden would run barefoot on an acre of land. I told them we could turn that into a baseball field if they'd let me. And they're raising and have adopted 5 children who were abandoned by, dare I say it, in some cases, Christian households. They, on their own, took these children in, adopted them all, and care for them. And aside from that, they both work at the local animal shelter in this tiny little town in Middleburg, Florida. And when they're not at the animal shelter, they brought 4 pit bulls into their home who they adopted that I got to play with at Christmas. And wherever you go throughout their house, there are signs of family, and family is love, and Christmas trees. And even though their microwave might not have worked one day, they cook for these children, and they're raising these children. And they had me go to one day to the a church that I absolutely love, where everybody was cheering. and it was fun. I forget what it was called. And a 13-year-old boy, they said a prayer for me before my last operation. It said life matters.
You're going to continue to work next. The passion for you is what you're seeing Governor DeSantis do in Florida. And this is going to become a passion project for you in terms of standing up for trans community.
It's terrible. What he's doing is absolutely frightening and horrible. He's saying their lives don't matter when their lives are worth every bit as much as his wife, Casey, who had cancer and survived. How can he diminish or demean free Americans who are living their life? It's so precious, our lives. We've seen the collapse of buildings in Miami Beach, the terrible tragedy in Turkey, the World Trade Center, where I lost friends from Hofstra Law School, 3,000 in one day. We thought that was a life-shaping event for America. Can you imagine what Syrians are going through when they lose 30,000 people in a single day? Life is too precious on Earth. We have to value every single moment. It's not only what Robert Frost said, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and it has made all the difference. In your life, in every life of every young person, at every level of government, whether you're a city commissioner who's gay in Orlando, you have to choose life. Look at Pulse. And then something happened while I was in the hospital last month getting operated on. My brother told me there was a similar shooting in Denver where he lives. This is unacceptable. This is not the way we should live our life. I don't want to live our life.
You know, Norm, and I can hear the passion in your voice, which is exciting. One last thing that I want to explore with you is age. You've been here 47 years. You literally have documented the LGBTQ community, not only here in South Florida, but really all over the country. 73, you're in this transition at South Florida Gay News and what you've built there. And it's clear you still have passion left. You're not done. One of the things that's interesting to me about age is at the end of the year, South Florida Gay News does the very fine Best of South Florida. I think it's an outstanding program that you do in recognizing those that need additional help in recognition and what our community likes about our community. And I really applaud you for it and the development of it. But you did
my staff thanks you.
Yes, and you did an issue at the end of the year that you've done for a long time called Person of the Year. And I was very moved at your situation and what you've gone through over the last couple of years, your age and longevity, transition of younger voices like Jason to now step into your shoes. Your Person of the Year at SFGN was a Gen Zer leading a nonprofit, Max Fenning. And I thought it was just so interesting that the year finishes in the transition of what we watched Norm Kent do to recognizing our Person of the Year is somebody that's 20 years old. Age and the issues of age, which, what do you think about the young LGBTQ community? Are you a big cheerleader for them? You think that they're involved in the way they should? What do you think?
I think in many respects, it's not a matter of pushing down the door and coming out of the closet. It's just pushing the curtain aside. It's accepting who you are as they are. And when they add letters to the definition of what LGBTQIA is, what they're really doing is showing how we have always been an incredible part of the community and people didn't include us. Will Smith, the actor or comedian, once said, it's not that there's discrimination against the African American community. It's just that we're filming it for the first time. And I have a series of incredible jokes about that. I remember once in the Deep South when a couple of white drunks ran over a young black kid, and the black kid they said he got away with it. I probably shouldn't tell this joke and then yell at me. And I said, what do you mean he got away with it? They said, well, they only charged him with leaving the scene of an accident. That's not fair. But as a criminal defense attorney, I've seen gay people prosecuted for lewd and lascivious acts that when straight people make out on the Fort Lauderdale beach, they get home and they get congratulated by their buddies in beer parties for having scored, and the gay people wind up with 30-day sentences.
Yeah.
Totally unacceptable. And it's a matter of standing up for your rights and never walking away from them. You can't ever look the other way, and nothing's better proof than Ron DeSantis. We thought probably when we won Don't Ask, Don't Tell, when we won gay marriage, when Barack Obama appointed a wealth of people from different populations to office, that things were going to be perfect for us. But look, here we are, less than a decade later, fighting to be able to allow someone to watch La Cage aux Folles on Broadway without the artist being arrested. Don't they remember Joel Grey in Cabaret?
Cabaret, right? Exactly. So, to the point of your cover at the end of the year, so 73-year-old Norm Kent, thousands and thousands of stories that you've told about our community in SFGN. Do you have confidence in our young LGBT that they're going to lead us next? Are you confident where they're taking us?
Sometimes you're so busy with the here and now that you don't always look towards the future. You just try to do your job right daily and hope the rest will fall in. But why not be confident? I remember when in 1975 at Hofstra Law School, I wrote a column about Disney World being America's dream, and now I'm thinking about retiring to Orlando. And the reason I mention that is because you and a lot of people probably don't know that when they first started to allow gays into Disney World, there were Christian groups and protests that wanted to stop gays from coming. They flew helicopters saying, gays not welcome, gays have to have a dress code. We don't want gays at Disney World. And now one of the biggest events that Disney holds are gay days. Well, I didn't want to move to Orlando because I thought every time you go up there, it's bumper to bumper traffic. Well, not if you're not there for gay days. But the point I'm trying to make is, sure, there's reason to be confident that the new generation of children, oh God, I can't use that word, that the new generation of young people will bring and carry us into the future with pride and passion and the perseverance you're generous enough to say that I have, that the Brandon Wolfs and Nikki Harrises and the wealth of gay leaders like a guy who I interviewed on my radio show, Chevron Jones.
Yep, Senator.
There's very much a reason to believe in the future they will lead us in and bring us to. And people that look back at the past are people that are unhappy about things they can't control. I like to talk about the joy of the rising sun. We can control the here and now. We can control today. The future may lie beyond our vision. It ultimately isn't beyond our control. We can be like Robert Kennedy tried to do before he was shot and seek a new world. So yeah, be happy that all the young people aren't necessarily going to be everything they want to be. Maybe in 2023, 50 of them won't try to fit into a 1968 Volkswagen like I did when I was a kid.
You are aging yourself.
But there's the future.
I want to take it, that's thoughts on young LGBT. Let's finish by talking about older LGBT. Our community seems to prize youth, and we seem to polish and be enamored by young. You do not represent that. Your experience and the stories that you've told and what you've done in your law practice and how you've taken on the powerful and all the related issues of the stories that you've told at South Florida Gay News. How do you think the LGBTQ community is getting it, or what they're thinking about our most experienced, oldest people in our community? Where you sit in that? Where do you think the LGBTQ community is on the age of Norm Kent?
I hope, and I have learned, that as our community, consisting of many elderly gay men, adapt to age, they make plans with local attorneys to have their estate handled, their affairs handled. You don't want to find out that a nephew and niece you haven't seen in 20 years is suddenly placing you in an assisted living facility against your will. I've been blessed with John Fugate and Brian Swinford literally giving up their job in Orlando to come back night after night to take care of me when I can't get out of bed and I fall down over my dogs in the hallway and bust my front teeth or wind up in an emergency room. John works in Orlando, and 3 nights last week he drove down after work to come see me in the hospital and make sure I was getting the care. So if older people are blessed with the fortune of being able to take care of themselves, they need to do it now while they have the capacity to and can still engineer those decisions so that people like David Jobin at Our Fund and my friend Steve at Latino Salute and Mike at AIDS Healthcare Foundation and all the others, Pavarello with food banks. Forgive me if I leave one out, I'm bound to. I want the gay community to understand these things can happen quickly and suddenly, and you might not have time to prepare, so do it while you can. Go to a lawyer and make sure that your affairs are in order. That's the best advice I could give older people. Other than that, you're old enough to love yourself and enjoy the good time. And if you get a chance to go sailing in Key West, or somebody wants to take you on a cruise, you can't take it with you. Use what you have now to enjoy every moment and appreciate everything. There's not a Broadway show I want to miss, whether it's the newest one or, you know, a recreation of The Sound of Music, and I love that one. Auntie Mame, love it, use it, let life become as joyful as you can make it. You know, try to remember that you have to have a budget too, but enjoy every moment. And that's what we said in the 60s. You know, we said in Woodstock for free love, free spirit. What we meant is, if it's to be, it's up to me. Be all you can be.
Yeah.
I probably have lots of quotes. I can't remember that. You know,
it's good advice. Last thing I want to leave viewers with, and talking and having this opportunity to talk about your impact on LGBTQ community with what you've been through, this pandemic and the brain surgery and the pancreatic cancer and getting COVID in hospital and all of the stuff that the isolation of pandemic. I know that many people in our community thought, that's it. Norm's done. I never thought that for a minute. Lots of people behind you around the scenes did think that repeatedly. I heard it myself over and over. I might have even wished it down and over.
I heard it. I heard it, and I said, you know, I would say things never. Oh, I can't remember the quote. It's one of my favorites, but see, I can't remember things, but one of my favorites is don't let the future haunt you. But I can't remember.
And that's where my question is going. So mortality is in front of all of us. It's an eventuality for all of us. Gay community seems to push it off. No, I'm going to live forever. And maybe that's part of the spectacularness of the gay community and the LGBTQ community. Mortality is sitting right in front of you. And I'm just curious, with what you've gone through over the last years and the spectacular life that you've had and the spectacular stories that you've told, are you facing that mortality? Do you have fear? Do you have, I'm not even thinking about it. Where are you in terms of your own mortality?
I'm excited that I'm in the middle of a National Fantasy Baseball Championship draft, and I landed Anthony Rizzo from Parkland, who survived testicular cancer at the age of 20, and Mike Stanton, who hit 58 homers for the Marlins. You try to get excited about something every day. I didn't like falling over my dogs in the hallway and losing my 2 front teeth. But there's Dr. Howard Cunningham, who is blessed with an incredible husband who he lost last year, but has a wonderful child. And I'm thrilled that the gay community has had so much success, but I'm trying to remember, never a downhill skier, if you've ever done that, never turns around and looks back. No one that's ever on skis moving down a mountain will stop to look and see what's behind them. That's one sure way of killing yourself.
Yeah, that's fun.
So you look forward all the time, and if you live that life, then that's the kind you will live with. You don't, everybody has, as you said, a mortal end, but you don't die from cancer. You don't lose a battle with cancer. It's not how you die, it's how you live. We have a chance on this earth, like I said, to visit everywhere. One of my best friends, who's now the president of NORML, I was the president of the National Organization for Marijuana Laws, I asked Rick Steves, who runs Rick Steves Europe, to become president, and he certainly didn't need to be, but he chose to be, and he said he's loved the last 2 years, and he's got the happiest show on television.
Yes, he does.
He's got the nicest show on television. I sit in the hospital. In fact, sometimes I look forward to going to the hospital. He said, all right, so I guess I'll watch Rick Steves in Sicily this week,
That's right.
and I'll see what they're eating in Palermo.
That's right.
And I watched him all weekend, and he's always smiling, and he's always happy. Now, I know because of our association professionally, like everybody else, he's had difficulties. But look at what a vast, beautiful, spectacular earth and planet we have. And whether you're staying in a piazza in Italy or walking through the pubs in Scotland or places all over the globe, there's so much beauty on this earth. I mean, I'd like to be with Wayne Besson, 25 years old and semi-naked at the factory in Mykonos on Greece, picking up some 19-year-old kid named Konstantinos. But it doesn't always work out that way.
That's very.
Wayne will get a kick out of that.
Yes. Well, I think it's very interesting. You have unique opportunities to not look back and to look forward. But it's also, from my seat, an opportunity to look back at the contributions that you've had for community. There are 20-year-olds that have absolutely no understanding of Norm Kent. And to me, that's a little bit of a shame, because the stories that our community is built on are built on your stories, and it's why we should take note of it. As long as you're feeling up to it, we want to do more with you, Norm. We want to talk about some of the most interesting stories that you've told at SFGN, and interesting people, and the interesting stories about the South Florida community, and what happened and when and where. and who and how often, and talk about all of those things. So we're going to have you back. Norm, we wish
I
you all...
hope to be able to be here.
Yes, yeah, you will be. I suspect you will be.
I'm hoping I'm more than under a tree at Star of David with my 7-year-old lab urinating on my...
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, one of the problems from the brain surgery is I lost hearing in my right ear, and I had to go to an audiologist, and I had to pay thousands of dollars for a hearing aid, and my nurse put them up on my shelf right above my medical bed. And this weekend, while I was moved into the hospital, my 8-week-old puppy, Moonlight, and we should name him Moonwreck, went on top of the bed, said, I think I can eat those.
Oh dear.
And he ate my hearing aids. So when I came home, I looked for my hearing aids and they weren't there. And John said, when I get back from Orlando, I'll find them. And we found them in little pieces. And you know, they charge a lot more for food, dog food nowadays. But my goodness, why would he want to eat hearing aids?
It's called the problems of gay men. That's what it is. Norm, we thank you very much. Fascinating.
This has been fun.
Yeah, and we're very honored that you're here.
I hope I didn't embarrass Jason.
No, I suspect I suspect you did not, or John Hayden. We thank you very much, Norm, for being with us for this fascinating glimpse into our community, and we thank you for being here at Queer News tonight.
Okay, thanks so much. Now let's hope my nurse can figure out how to...
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth